My name's Samuel Carter, and I'm 59 years old. 3 weeks ago, everything I thought I knew about my life tilted on its axis, 6 glowing numbers on a lottery ticket worth $73 million. I can still picture it, me sitting right here at this old kitchen table, the ticket shaking between my fingers, my breath caught somewhere deep in my chest. The shock hit me like a wave, but beneath it there was something colder, sharper, and steadier than anything else. A single decision that rooted itself inside me like stone. Nobody in my family would ever hear about this win. Not my son. Not my daughter. And certainly not my brother, the man who's been draining me dry for years. You see, in my family, money never meant love. It meant power. Control. And I was about to find out just how small I really was in their eyes. But here's the part most folks won't believe: before I spent even a single dime of that jackpot, I decided to test them. I wanted to see what they'd do if they thought I was flat broke. Who would still stand beside me? Who would vanish? Who would show their true colors? The answers cut deeper than I ever expected. They nearly broke me. And they changed the way I look at everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. That first night after the numbers came up, I didn't close my eyes once. Instead, I sat at this table staring at that ticket, the dull light buzzing overhead, the steady tick of the old wall clock keeping me company. $73 million. After taxes, maybe 50. Still more money than I could wrap my head around. For a split second, the boy I used to be, the kid who grew up in a drafty old farmhouse in Illinois, wanted to run into the street, waving that ticket and shouting to the world that I was finally free. But the man I'd become, a man hardened by decades of disappointment and letdowns, knew better. I poured myself a bourbon, even though the doctor's been on me about my blood pressure. The amber liquid caught the light, and as it burned down my throat, my mind wandered to all the times I'd been played for a fool. Andrew, my boy, had called 2 years back, middle of the night. "Dad, it's just 6,000. Once the business takes off, I'll pay you right back." I wired the money before dawn. Never heard a word about it again. Laura, my daughter, she's smoother with it. Wanted me at her side when she bought her first condo, said it meant the world to her. But when the closing costs came due, she needed me to step in. Promised it was temporary. That was 5 years ago. Now she barely answers my calls. And then there's Thomas, my younger brother. If there's a record somewhere for borrowing money without paying it back, he'd be a gold medalist. Always had that whiny, guilty tone, making me feel like the bad guy if I said no. Even when all I had was a modest pension and a steady paycheck, he managed to twist it until I opened my wallet. I set the bourbon glass down with a dull thud and made my choice right then. Silence was going to be my shield. If they knew, they'd circle like vultures, each with some story, some emergency, some urgent plea. And no matter how much I gave, it wouldn't be generosity. It would be chains. A leash around my neck. Morning came creeping through the blinds, laying stripes of light across the worn wood floor. I brewed a pot of black coffee, strong enough to make my eyes water, and sat down at the laptop. My fingers hovered over the keys before I typed, "How to claim lottery anonymously." That's when I stumbled onto blind trusts. Hire an attorney, set it up, and just like that, my identity could be hidden. I could walk away with millions, and the world would never know Samuel Carter had hit the jackpot. I found myself smiling for the first time in days. That secrecy was worth more than the ticket itself. But even with that safety net taking shape, another memory pushed its way into my head. Over the years, I'd carried my family through storm after storm without complaint. And when I was the one drowning, when Margaret, my wife, was sick and the hospital bills piled up, who showed up? Not Andrew. Not Laura. Not Thomas. They all had excuses. It was Aunt Beatrice, my father's sister, who lived on a threadbare pension, who pressed a check for $200 into my hand and whispered, "I wish it were more, Samuel." That memory burned. It still does. So I sat at the computer scrolling through law firms downtown until I found one that seemed promising. Picked up the phone and dialed. A crisp voice answered, "Dalton and Myers LLP, how may I direct your call?" "Yes," I said, my voice quieter than usual. "I'd like an appointment with Ms. Carolyn Dalton. It's about estate and financial planning." A pause. Then, "We have an opening tomorrow at 10. Does that work for you?" "That'll do," I muttered, jotting the address down on a notepad. I hung up, and the silence of the house pressed in on me again. This old one-story home with its creaky floors and peeling paint might not look like much, but it was mine. And it held the last of Margaret's laughter in its walls. After she passed, I couldn't bring myself to move. The thought of filling these rooms with relatives begging for money turned my stomach. That evening, I sat on the porch as the streetlights blinked on. My neighbor, Mr. Whitfield, waved while walking his dog. I raised my hand back, thinking how lucky he was, how blissfully unaware he was of the little slip of paper in my pocket that could buy every house on the block. I envied his ignorance. My phone buzzed on the porch table beside me. A text from Thomas: "Samuel, buddy, can we talk? I'm in a bit of a jam." I didn't respond. Not yet. I sat there staring at Thomas's message, my jaw locked tight. That text was the reason I couldn't tell them about the lottery. I hadn't even cashed the ticket yet, and already the old claws were reaching for me again. I slipped the phone into my pocket, stood up, and walked inside, the decision pressing heavier with every step. The next morning, I put on my best jacket, a navy one that still fit, though the buttons had loosened with age. I rode the elevator up to the 10th floor of a downtown high-rise made of glass and steel. The place smelled like polished marble and quiet money. Carolyn Dalton greeted me at the reception. Her handshake was firm, steady. She looked about my age, her silver hair pulled back neat, glasses framing sharp eyes. "Mr. Carter," she said kindly, "come with me." Inside her office, I pulled the envelope from my pocket like it was a lifeline. When I laid that ticket on her desk, her eyebrows jumped for half a second before she caught herself. Professional composure slid over her face like armor. "I see," she said softly. "Well, you came to the right place. We can protect your identity, but first, what do you want this money to do for you?" Her question hung in the air. What did I want? Security. Freedom. But more than that, I wanted clarity. I wanted to know, once and for all, whether my family loved me or just loved what I could give them. "I want to keep it quiet," I said at last. "And if I ever help anyone, it'll be on my terms." Carolyn gave a small nod. "Then we'll start with a blind trust. It'll take a few weeks to set up, but once it's done, no one will be able to touch those funds but you." The words made me breathe easier, though a pit of dread still sat in my chest. On the bus ride home, I watched the city smear past the window, gray buildings fading into one another. My mind drifted back through years of birthdays, holidays, and family dinners where I'd been more wallet than guest. Every phone call that started out sweet but always ended with a hand outstretched. And I kept hearing Carolyn's question, "What do you want this money to do for you?" That night, the answer came, slow and then sharp, like a knife finally finding its edge. I wouldn't tell them about the winnings. I would test them. I'd tell each one the same story: I was in trouble, lost money in bad investments, about to lose the house. I'd ask for $8,000. Not a fortune, not impossible, but enough to matter. Enough to show me who they really were. At the kitchen table, I wrote their names down with a pen that scratched across the paper like it was cutting something open. Andrew. Laura. Thomas. Even Diana, my sister-in-law. Every one of them who had borrowed, begged, or demanded from me over the years. I even wrote Beatrice's name, though deep down I knew she'd help if she could. When I finished, my chest felt tight. Was I being cruel? Maybe. But after years of carrying them through every storm, didn't I deserve to know the truth? Didn't I deserve to see their real faces? I folded the paper, slid it into my pocket, and blew out the candle on the table. The flame sputtered before fading into smoke. Tomorrow I'd make the first call. That night, I lay awake, the list of names folded neat inside my pocket. Margaret's absence pressed heavy in the silence, the same silence that had filled this house since she passed. Once, I thought that quiet was the cruelest companion. But over the years, I'd learned to treat silence like a friend. Silence didn't ask for anything. Silence didn't lie. Silence didn't pretend to love me while draining me dry. My thoughts wandered back to old wounds I'd tried to bury. I was 17 when I first learned money meant more than I did in this family. I'd just been accepted into University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. I remember walking into the kitchen, letter in hand, my heart bursting with pride. My mother gave me a faint smile. My father just shook his head. "We can't afford it, Samuel. Not unless you take loans." Thomas sat at the table, 5 years younger, slurping cereal without a care in the world. That night, while my parents argued about money, my mother whispered, "Maybe Thomas will make things easier on us one day. He's got the charm." Charm, she called it. I carried 2 jobs through college just to scrape by. I never asked them for another dime. But Thomas? He always got what he wanted: summer camps, schoolbooks, his first car. Sometimes it came out of my savings. Sometimes it was a check in my name. I told myself it was fine. He was younger. He'd grow out of it. But Thomas never outgrew it. He just turned into a man who thought the world owed him, and somehow that bill always ended up in my hands. Margaret was the one who changed that for me. She grounded me. Gentle, steady, a schoolteacher who believed kindness was worth more than any dollar. We built a life together in a small house with peeling wallpaper, but laughter in every room. We raised Andrew and Laura there. Those years, before the cracks began, were the only time I ever felt truly secure in my family. We never had much, but back then it felt like enough. Then the sickness came, and it was as if the ground shifted beneath us. Margaret's diagnosis, lung cancer, shattered everything. She'd never even touched a cigarette. I worked myself raw trying to keep her comfortable. I sold my boat, drained our retirement, and picked up shifts I was too old for. When the bills grew too steep, I did what I swore I'd never do: I called my kids and I called Thomas. Andrew answered first, his voice clipped and impatient. "Dad, I can't keep bleeding money. The startup's just taking off. $5,000 here, $10,000 there, it adds up." His words cut deeper than he knew. Laura's voice was gentler, but it landed the same. "Dad, Stephen and I are paying off the condo. Maybe in a few months we could." Her sentence just faded away. "And Thomas," he sighed like I'd ruined his night. "I've got debts, Samuel. Maybe you should refinance the house. That's what people do." I remember sitting at the kitchen table that night, Margaret asleep in the other room, my head in my hands. Not one of them stood beside me when I was drowning. Only Beatrice, my father's sister, living on a pension that barely covered groceries. She pressed $200 into my palm with shaking hands. "I wish it were more," she whispered. I told her it was enough, but the mix of gratitude and shame never left me. 6 months later, Margaret was gone. Andrew and Laura came to the funeral dressed in stiff black clothes, checking their phones between condolences. Thomas stood at the pulpit talking about how family was everything, then bolted early to catch a flight to Vegas. The hollowness of it all stuck harder than their words. "Dad, you'll be okay," Andrew said, patting my shoulder, car keys in his other hand. "Call me if you need anything." Laura's offer floated away just as easily. Thomas hugged me, reeking of whiskey and cologne, muttering, "Stay strong, brother. Stay strong." As if strength alone could replace love. Years later, I'd still find myself staring at the flame of a candle on my kitchen table, those memories refusing to fade. And now, with that lottery ticket in my pocket, I finally had something that could strip away all their excuses, all their masks. The money hadn't just made me rich, it gave me the chance to see them clearly. My plan was simple: I'd tell them I was broke, that I'd lost money in bad investments, and that the house was on the line. I'd ask for $8,000, not an impossible sum, just enough to matter. For Andrew, it was pocket change. For Laura and her surgeon husband, less than a vacation. For Thomas, it was less than he already owed me. I wondered who would step up and who would vanish. The question twisted inside me, part anticipation, part dread. Did I really want the truth? What if it only confirmed what I had feared all along? That in my family, love was just another word for transaction. The thought gnawed at me until sleep finally pulled me under. The next morning, I walked through town. The air was sharp with autumn, leaves crunching underfoot. I passed the diner Margaret used to love, where we'd sat on Sundays with coffee, sometimes with Beatrice working her crossword beside us. Now the booth was filled with strangers, the window fogged with their breath. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. My thumb hovered over Andrew's name, but I wasn't ready. Instead, I scrolled to Douglas. He'd been my neighbor 30 years ago, a retired cop built like an oak with eyes that saw everything. We'd kept in touch, sharing beers, trading old war stories of different kinds. He picked up on the second ring. "Samuel, long time. What's on your mind? Can you meet me?" I asked. "I need perspective." We met at the American Legion Post 888 Hall, walls lined with faded flags and photos of boys who'd given everything. Douglas slid into the booth across from me, hands folded, gaze steady. I told him everything: the ticket, the money, my silence, and the test. He didn't interrupt. He just chewed on it, jaw working, eyes sharp. When I finished, he leaned back and let out a long breath. "If you test them, Samuel, be ready for the answer. Once you see who they are, you can't unsee it." I need to know, I said, my voice cracking. He nodded slowly. Then do it. But protect yourself. Write it down. Record it. Not for them, for you. So when they twist the story later, you'll know exactly how it went. I swallowed hard. He was right. My family had always been experts at rewriting history. I would need proof, not to shame them, not for court, but for myself, so I'd never forget. That night, I came home and sat again at the same kitchen table. The same table where I'd mourned Margaret, where I'd eaten alone too many times, where I'd stared at the ticket that changed everything. I pulled out an old leather notebook, the one Margaret had given me years ago when she said every man needed a place to keep his thoughts. On the very first page, I pressed my pen hard into the paper and wrote 2 words across the top, the test. Beneath it, I listed the names, Andrew, Laura, Thomas, even Diana, my sister-in-law. And at the very bottom, I wrote Beatrice. My pen dug so deep the ink bled through. After each name, I left a blank space, ready to record whatever answer they gave me. When I finally set the pen down, I closed the book and laid my hand on its cover. The candle on the table flickered once, twice, then steadied. In that quiet, I whispered to no one but myself, let's see who really stands beside me. The clock ticked past midnight. Tomorrow, it would begin. I woke before dawn. The house was still, but my mind wasn't. I kept running lines through my head, trying to imagine how a man like me, always steady, always dependable, would sound if he admitted he was faltering. That thought alone felt foreign on my tongue. I brewed a pot of coffee, black as tar, and sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper. I scribbled phrases, testing them out in the silence. The company I invested in collapsed, I muttered under my breath. The bank is circling. I need 8,000 just to keep the house. The words sat heavy in my mouth, but they rang with truth. I had nearly lost this home once before, when Margaret was sick. Maybe that was why I knew exactly how to phrase desperation without needing to exaggerate it. I pictured their reactions one by one. Andrew would sigh, shift blame, maybe give me a lecture on financial planning, as if I hadn't spent my life teaching him what discipline meant. Laura would sound sympathetic, her voice soft as silk, but the excuses would be hidden right inside her kindness. Thomas? He'd probably laugh, pretend he wished he could help, then spin some tall tale about being on the edge of some big deal. And Diana? Diana would click her tongue, whisper to the rest of them that Samuel had finally lost it, and enjoy the gossip more than she'd ever enjoy helping me. By then, the candle I had left burning the night before was just a stub. I rubbed at my eyes and reached for the phone. My finger hovered over Andrew's name, but something inside me hesitated. He was my son, too close, too raw. I needed to be sharper before I faced him. So I scrolled to Laura. My daughter. She'd always been the gentler one, the one who still remembered to call on holidays, even if it felt like obligation more than love. If anyone gave me hope, it might be her. I pressed the button, lifted the phone to my ear, and counted the rings. 1, 2, 3. Then her bright, practiced voice came through. Dad, this is a surprise. Everything okay? I took a slow breath and let it out, letting weariness sink into my voice. Not exactly, Laura. I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important. A pause. Then, what's wrong? I let the silence stretch, just long enough to let her imagination get ahead of me. Finally, I spoke. The firm I put some savings into collapsed. Fraud, bad management, I don't know. The money's gone. And now the bank's already calling about the mortgage. I need some help. Just enough to keep me afloat until I figure things out. About 8,000. I heard her sharp intake of breath, and for half a heartbeat I thought she might surprise me. But then her voice came, soft, careful, practiced. Oh, Dad, that's awful. I can't believe they did that to you, but 8,000 is a lot. Stephen just paid the kids' school tuition, and we're still catching up on the condo renovations. Maybe in a couple of months we could. I cut in gently. Laura, the bank won't wait a couple of months. They'll start proceedings within weeks. The silence on the line stretched too long. I could almost hear her weighing the cost of my crisis against the comfort of her life. Finally, she said, I'll talk to Stephen. Maybe we can manage a smaller amount, but I can't promise. A smaller amount. A half measure. A delay. I could hear it in her voice, this conversation was already over. I understand, I said flatly. Thank you for listening. Of course, Dad, she replied quickly, almost too quickly. We'll figure something out. Don't worry. But I knew she wasn't going to figure anything out. Not for me. I ended the call, set the phone back on the table, and opened the leather notebook. Under her name, I wrote, sympathy. Excuses. No commitment. The taste in my mouth turned bitter. For a long time I just sat there, my coffee gone cold, staring at the words I had written. A part of me wanted to stop the whole experiment right then, preserve whatever illusions I had left. But illusions are poison. Once you swallow the antidote, you can't go back. By noon, I'd rehearsed again, sharpening the story, making it cleaner. This time, I scrolled to Thomas. My brother picked up on the second ring, his voice loud, full of false cheer. Samuel. Long time, brother. How's the quiet life treating you? Not so quiet, I replied. I've run into trouble. Trouble? He chuckled like it was a joke. Don't we all? I did not return Thomas's laugh. Instead, I laid it out plain. I told him I had made some poor investments, that I had lost a large portion of my savings, and that the bank was circling my home. I said I needed $8,000 just to hold things together until I could sort it out. He did not even pause to think. 8? Hell, I do not even have 8,000 lying around. Times are tough, you know. Clients are paying late. Maybe you should sell that old truck or refinance the place. You have always been good at figuring things out. Thomas, I said evenly, I have helped you with far more than that. When you wanted into that doomed restaurant, when you begged me for money after your divorce, I was there. I came through every single time. The line went quiet. Then he sighed. Yeah, well, that was different. Family helps family, right? You will figure this out. You always do. Family helps family, I repeated softly, letting the words settle on my tongue with all their bitter irony. He quickly changed the subject, asked if I had seen the Browns game, as if we had not just trampled decades of imbalance. I cut the call short, wrote his name in the notebook, and marked down the truth: no money. Deflection. Empty platitudes. By late afternoon, the house itself seemed heavier, the walls absorbing the weight of every answer I was gathering. I stepped outside, leaves crunching under my boots, hoping the air would clear my head. But every sound echoed their refusals. I thought of Margaret then, and wondered what she might say. She would probably remind me not to torture myself, not to measure love by dollars. And yet she would admit this was never about the money, it was about whether love existed at all. As dusk crept in, I lit another candle and returned to the notebook. 2 names down, 2 failures. Laura with her excuses. Thomas with his deflections. I poured a bourbon, the ice clinking like a warning bell, and braced myself for the next call. Andrew's name stared back at me from the page like a challenge. When I finally dialed, darkness had settled outside. The only light in the room was the flicker of the candle and the glow of the phone screen. Andrew picked up on the 4th ring, his voice brisk, impatient. Dad, everything okay? I am in the middle of something. I steadied my breath. Not really. I would not be calling if it were not serious. I made some investments, they collapsed, and now I am short on the mortgage. I need $8,000 to hold the bank off. There was a pause, then a dry, sharp laugh. Dad, you should have known better. At your age, gambling with investments? Come on. I cannot just hand you $8,000. I have payroll to cover, a new office lease, and a product launch. You should have planned. The words landed heavy. I kept my voice steady. Andrew, I have been planning my whole life. I gave you money for your business when no one else believed in you. I sacrificed for you. This is the first time I have asked you for help. His tone hardened. And I appreciate that, but I cannot. You will figure it out. You always do. The same excuse Thomas had used. I closed my eyes, swallowed down the bile that rose in my throat. I see, I said quietly. Look, Dad. I will call you later. Got to run. He hung up before I could reply. I stared at the dark phone screen, silence pressing in again. Slowly, I wrote his name in the notebook. Dismissive lectures. Refusal. The bourbon glass felt heavy in my hand. 3 calls. 3 answers. 3 confirmations of what I had long suspected but never wanted to believe. The candle flame bent, as if it too felt the weight of my grief. I leaned back in my chair and whispered into the empty room, so this is what family means. The clock ticked toward midnight. Outside, the world went on as if nothing had changed. But in my house, everything had. The experiment was underway, and it was already showing me more than I was ready to face. And yet I knew, deep in my bones, I could not stop. Tomorrow, there would be more names to call. By the time I reached the end of the list, I would know exactly who they were, and who I was without them. Morning light slipped through the blinds, pale and gray, making the kitchen seem colder than it was. The notebook still lay open on the table, its pages already scarred with the truth. Laura, sympathy wrapped in excuses. Thomas, deflection and empty words. Andrew, lectures and refusal. Each entry carved another line into the truth I had been running from. I brushed my hand across the leather cover, almost hoping the ink would smear, soften, blur. But ink does not lie. I poured a cup of coffee, though it did little to settle me. My chest ached with the weight of those conversations replaying again and again. For years, I had clung to the hope that if I ever truly needed them, they would show up. Now the illusion was cracking apart, and I could not see how to piece it back together. Still, I had started this test, and there were more names to call. Next was Diana, my sister-in-law, Thomas's wife. If anyone had perfected the art of judgment, it was her. At family gatherings, she never missed a chance to comment on my quaint little house, her smile thin, her words lined with sugar and spite. Once, I overheard her tell Margaret, "Samuel is reliable. Maybe too reliable. Men like that never really get ahead, do they?" I had let it slide back then, but the memory stuck. Now it was her turn. I scrolled through my contacts, pressed the call button, and listened. She picked up on the second ring, her voice clipped and efficient. "Samuel, what do I owe the pleasure?" Diana's voice came sharp through the receiver, polite on the surface but with no real warmth behind it. I let out a heavy sigh, one I made sure she could hear. "Diana, I would not be calling if it were not serious. I am in some trouble." "Oh?" There was a flicker of curiosity in her tone, though not an ounce of concern. "I made some bad investments," I told her, keeping my voice steady. "The money's gone. The bank is circling, and I need $8,000 to hold them off." The pause on her end said plenty. I could almost picture her lips pursing, her eyes narrowing. Then came the laugh, short, sharp, dismissive. "Samuel, Samuel. I always wondered when you would stumble. You've carried yourself like Mr. Righteous all these years, helping everyone, acting like you knew better. And now you expect us to rescue you?" Her words sliced deep, but I had expected no better. "I am asking for help, Diana. That is what family does. At least, I thought it was." She scoffed. "Family helps family when it makes sense. Thomas and I have responsibilities. Maybe you should sell that little house of yours. Downsize. Start living within your means, like the rest of us." My hands trembled, but I kept my voice even. "You mean like when I helped Thomas after the restaurant collapsed? Or when I gave you both money for hurricane repairs?" Her silence said everything. When she finally spoke, her voice was sharp, defensive. "That was different. That was for something everyone benefited from. This is just your mess." I closed my eyes, let her words sink in, then said quietly, "I see. Thank you for your honesty." She hung up without a goodbye. I stared at the phone in my hand, the dial tone humming like a reminder. Slowly, I wrote her name in the notebook: scorn. Judgment. No help. The bitterness sat in me like a stone. 4 calls, 4 refusals. I poured a glass of bourbon and swallowed hard, though the burn did little to dull the ache. By midday, I was pacing the living room, the notebook spread open on the coffee table. My eyes kept landing on the last name on the list, one I had almost written down as an afterthought: Beatrice. Sweet, stubborn Beatrice. She had been the only one to slip me $200 years ago when Margaret was sick, whispering she wished it were more. She lived on almost nothing, yet she had given when no one else did. Fairness said I needed to call her too. But I hesitated. If she said no, I wasn't sure I could bear it. If she said yes, it would come at a cost she could not afford. My thumb hovered over her number for what felt like hours before I set the phone down and stepped outside. The autumn air was sharp, cooling my thoughts. I walked aimlessly past kids laughing in a yard and a couple whispering on a porch. The world moved on, unaware of the storm brewing in my chest. By the time I returned home, the sky was painted orange and pink with sunset. The notebook was still there, waiting. I picked up the phone, dialed, and listened. Her voice came through warm, familiar, steady. Samuel. It's been too long. How are you? My throat tightened. Not too good, Beatrice. I would not be calling if it wasn't important. Her tone shifted instantly, concern lacing every word. What's wrong? I let silence fill the line before I spoke. I lost money. Bad investments. The bank's coming after the house. I need $8,000 to keep it. She didn't hesitate, not even for a heartbeat. Oh, Samuel, she said softly. That's terrible. Of course I'll help. I don't have 8, but I can give you 3. It's nearly all my savings, but you need it more than I do. Her words hit harder than every refusal combined. My throat closed, my grip tightened on the phone. Beatrice, I can't. No arguments, she interrupted gently. Family helps family. You've always been there for me. Now it's my turn. Tears pricked my eyes, sharp and unwelcome. I turned my face away though no one could see me. Thank you, I whispered, my voice breaking. Don't thank me, she said firmly. Just promise me you'll be all right. Promise me this won't break you. I promise, I said, though my heart knew I was already broken. We talked a while longer, about small things, her garden, her health, the books she had been reading. When I hung up, the silence in my house felt different. Not heavy. Not empty. But alive, carrying the warmth of her kindness. I opened the notebook and wrote her name. This time, I didn't write failure. I wrote, gave nearly everything she had. No hesitation. True. I sat staring at the words until they blurred. For days, I had been stripping away the layers of my family, finding rot where I had hoped for strength. And now, here was the one with the least to spare, offering me more than anyone else. It wasn't the money that moved me, it was the instinct. The immediacy. The love. No calculations. No excuses. Just giving, because that is what love does. It soothed me and it cut me at the same time. Proof that love still existed, and proof of how badly the others had failed. I closed the notebook, rested my hand on the cover, and sat in the dim candlelight. Tomorrow there would be more calls, more truths. But that night, I let myself sit in the only truth that mattered. Sometimes the richest soul is the one with the emptiest pockets. The candle burned low, the bourbon glass sat empty, and outside the world slipped quietly into sleep. When the call with Beatrice ended, I sat in the dim room and whispered into the silence, I see you, Beatrice. I won't forget what you did. The next morning, I woke with swollen eyes. I had not cried in years, not even when Margaret died, at least not where anyone could see. But last night broke something in me. Beatrice's voice, her willingness to give almost everything she had without a second thought, had both comforted me and cut me open in ways I still couldn't name. In my notebook, her entry stood out, true. I had stared at that word until the letters blurred. It was the only line in those pages that didn't sting. Now I sat at the table with the notebook closed, its weight pressing against me like a stone. 4 refusals. One act of kindness that cost her more than all the rest combined. I should have felt vindicated, but instead I felt hollow, scraped clean inside. Every call had taken something from me. For the first time, I wondered if I had made a mistake, not in testing them, but in believing I could stand under the weight of the answers. Mid-morning, the phone rang. A number I didn't recognize flashed on the screen. When I answered, the voice steadied me instantly. Samuel, it's Douglas. Been thinking about what you told me. You free today? I glanced at the bourbon glass still sitting on the table from the night before. I'm free. Good. Meet me at the hall in an hour. Bring that notebook. The drive was short, but my knuckles went white around the steering wheel. At the American Legion Post 888 Hall, Douglas was waiting in the corner, 2 mugs of coffee sending up thin streams of steam. His eyes took me in, the tired lines carved deeper into my face, the slump in my shoulders. You've been calling, he said, not a question. I slid into the seat across from him, laid the notebook on the table. He tapped the cover with one finger and pulled it closer. Let's hear it. So I told him. Every excuse, every silence that had cut deeper than words. And finally, Beatrice, the one person who had the least to give, offering without hesitation. Douglas leaned back, shaking his head slowly. I'd like to say I'm surprised, but I'm not. People show who they really are when helping costs them something. That's why most don't bother. I feel like I'm ripping myself apart, I admitted. Every time I dial, I pray I'll be wrong. And every time, I'm not. He studied me, eyes steady. Then stop hoping. That's what's breaking you. Not the truth, the hope. His words landed like a hammer. He wasn't being cruel. He was just telling it plain, the way he always did. I need something, I said quietly. Something that'll hold me steady. Proof. Because I know myself. Later, when guilt creeps in, when they look me in the eye with their soft words and their sweet lies, I'll start doubting what I heard. I'll start thinking maybe I imagined it. Douglas nodded. Then keep records. Write it down. Date it. Save every word. Not for a lawyer, for your own mind. You've been gaslit your whole damn life. Don't let them twist this too. I stared at him, the weight of his words sinking deep. You think that'll help? I know it will. Remembering the sting isn't enough. Hearing their voices later, exactly as they said it, that's truth you can't argue with. He reached into his coat and slid something across the table. A small digital recorder. I hadn't even noticed he'd brought it. Use this for the next calls. Don't tell them. Just let it run. And when you're done, back it up. Keep it safe. One day, you'll thank me. I turned the device over in my hand. It was small, simple, light, but in that moment it felt heavier than gold. Douglas, I started. He cut me off. Don't thank me. I've seen this before. Families draining a man dry, then calling him selfish when he finally says no. You're not the first, Samuel. You won't be the last. We sat in silence, sipping coffee gone lukewarm. Then he leaned in one last time. And stop apologizing. You've spent your life cushioning their feelings. Quit softening it. Ask straight. Watch how quick the masks fall. The words dug into me. He was right. Every call so far, I'd pulled my punches, given them an easy out. Maybe I'd been protecting them. Maybe I'd just been protecting myself. Either way, if I really wanted the truth, it was time to stop padding it with hope. That evening, back at the kitchen table, I set the recorder down beside the phone. The candle burned low. I pressed the red button, watched the light blink, and dialed the next number. This time it was Victor, my cousin. He hadn't even been on the original list, but after the last few days, I decided to widen the circle. Years ago, he'd borrowed money from me to cover gambling debts, promised to pay me back. Never did. The line clicked. Samuel. Long time, cousin. What's going on? His voice was cheerful, too cheerful. I let the weariness bleed into mine. I'm in trouble, Victor. Lost money in some bad investments. The bank's threatening foreclosure. I need $8,000 to keep the house. His laugh was too loud, too forced. Aw man, that's rough. $8,000, huh? That's a lot. I'd love to help, really, but you know how it is. Things are tight. Tell you what, I'll put you on my prayer list. The hypocrisy made my jaw clench. A prayer list? I asked flatly. Yeah, he said quickly. That always helps me. Not as much as cash would, I replied. There was silence, then the sound of him clearing his throat. Well, good luck, cousin. I'm sure you'll figure it out. He hung up before I could say another word. The recorder's red light kept blinking, steady as a heartbeat, catching every syllable. Proof. I jotted down Victor's name in the book, hollow laugh. Prayers. No help. Then I poured another bourbon, thinking of Douglas's advice, stop apologizing, stop softening the ask. So when I called my niece Naomi, I dropped the preliminaries. No small talk, no setup. Naomi, I said, voice even, I need $8,000 to keep the bank from taking the house. Silence, then a scramble, student loans, rent, car payment, an avalanche of excuses. I did not soothe her, did not try to make it easier. I let the quiet sit until she faltered, and then I said only, thank you for being honest, and hung up. Clean. No pity-ornamented refusals. No room for them to dress this up. By the time the candle guttered and the recorder's light blinked through another night, the notebook pages were thicker. Names and short notes, anchors in ink. Instead of crushing me, the record gave me a strange new strength. Maybe it was the device in my pocket, maybe it was Douglas's blunt voice still echoing in my head. Maybe it was the awful clarity that comes when hope finally lifts like fog. Still, Beatrice's face kept coming back to me, the way she'd offered what she could, without calculating or asking why. That steadiness burned brighter than all the refusals. I put out the candle and whispered into the dark, one day they'll see, not because I planned to tell them, but because I trusted their own choices to show them. The recorder's red light clicked off and the house sank into a different kind of silence, not peace yet, but the hollow after the congregation leaves, all echoes and no filling. For days after, I played the tapes. Victor's fake laugh. Naomi's flustered list of bills. Beatrice's cracked voice promising $300 she could barely spare. The little recorder had become a mirror. I did not like the man who'd been smoothing things over his whole life. I was harder now, quieter, sharper. And the sharper I got, the more dangerous the idea became. Testing them with requests had shown me a lot. But what if I made them believe I was actually collapsing? Not just short on cash this month, but sinking, losing house, dignity, everything. Would they step forward to catch me, or would they step back and breathe easier? I started with Andrew. He'd not called since I first told the investment story. Silence was his answer, calculation his default. So late one evening, with the recorder running and my hand steady, I dialed. He answered clipped, like I'd interrupted something important. "Dad," he said. "My son," I told him. I let my voice wobble just enough. "I don't know how much longer I can hold on." The bank called again. They said foreclosure papers might be filed next week. There was a pause. I pictured him turning toward Sophie, whispering. When he came back, his voice was flat. "That's rough. What are you going to do?" I let the silence settle like a stone, then let myself sound defeated. "I don't know. Maybe I'll just let them take it. Maybe it'll be easier that way." He shifted tone, almost too quickly. "Well, if you lose the house, you can always move into assisted living. Sophie's mother found a good place for her aunt last year, payment plans, structured care." His voice even took on a bright tone, as if he'd found a practical solution. Assisted living. To him I was already an inconvenience to be boxed away. "I see," I murmured. "That's something to think about." "It might be best," he said, like he'd solved a problem. "You'd be around people your age, meals on schedule, medical staff, safer." I could almost see Sophie nodding, pleased. "Thank you, Andrew," I said quietly, the recorder's red eye blinking. "You've given me a lot to think about." I hung up before he could add the obligatory, "I'll call you later." I didn't pour a drink that night. I wanted the sting raw, not blurred by bourbon. I wanted to remember the exact cadence of his voice. The next day I called Laura. She picked up on the third ring, breathless, the world pulling at her already. "Dad, what's wrong?" she asked. "It's late," I said, forcing a tired sigh. "I don't know if I can cover the mortgage this month. I might be out on the street." Her pause wasn't concern. It was calculation, someone weighing risk against reward. Finally she said, "If that happens, Dad, you could sell the house and stay with someone. Maybe Uncle Thomas has room. Or you could look into one of those retirement communities. They are not that bad. Would you want me to take you in?" I asked quietly, letting the question drop like a stone into still water. The line stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. When her voice returned it was thin and practiced. "Dad, you know it's complicated, the kids, the space. You'd be uncomfortable." "Of course," I answered, swallowing the acid rising in my throat. "I wouldn't want to be a burden." "That's not what I mean," she fumbled. I cut her off. "Thank you, Laura. I'll figure it out." I ended the call. The recorder's little red light blinked on the table. That night I wrote in the notebook, "Andrew, offered assisted living." Eager relief in his tone. Laura, couldn't say yes. Silence louder than a refusal. I stared at the lines until my hand cramped. Each entry felt like another small grave for an old illusion. But oddly, I didn't feel weaker. Every time they showed their true faces, the mask I'd held up for them cracked a little more. The clearer they became, the less sway they had over me. Douglas rang the next day and didn't wait for me to answer. "They failed you again, didn't they?" he said. "Yes," I admitted. "Good." He barked the word, then softened. "Yes. Because the more they fail, the looser that leash gets. You think you're losing family, but what you're really losing is the hold they had on you." His words burned in me. He was right. Each refusal was betrayal, sure, but it was also release. So I stepped it up. If they believed I was on the edge, would anyone try to take advantage? I soon found out. A week later, Thomas appeared on my doorstep without calling. He hadn't been around in months, not since I'd fed him the rumor about my bad investments. "Samuel," he said too brightly as I let him in, the recorder snug in my pocket. He scanned the room like a vulture, eyes lingering on the bourbon and the unpaid bills I'd left in plain sight. "You know," he said as he settled into a chair, "I could pick this place up before the bank does. Give you some cash to tide you over. Not a lot, but it's something." He wanted to buy me out cheap, swoop in and take what he thought was a carcass. "Thomas," I asked slowly, "what would you do with the house?" He waved a hand. "Flip it. Rent it. Sophie's nephew needs a place. Everybody wins. Everybody but me." I let the silence stretch until he shifted. "I'll think about it," I said finally. As he left I caught his reflection in the window, smug, satisfied, like a man who believes he's outsmarted his kin. After the door clicked shut, I muttered into the recorder, "Thomas, vulture. Ready to gut me." That night the candle burned low and the shadows felt longer. Andrew's eagerness to tuck me away, Laura's cowardly silence, Thomas's greed, they didn't break me. Something else rose inside, not fury yet, but a cool, hard resolve. This had stopped being a test. It was preparation. They thought I was a broken man, they had no idea I was keeping every word, every smirk, every silence. One day I would show them the mirror they could not turn away from. Then they'd see what I saw, not family, not love, but a house of cards collapsing under its own weight. I snuffed the candle and said aloud to the empty room, "You've written your verdict. I'm just the witness." The recorder's red dot blinked off, sealing the night's confessions. The morning after Thomas's visit the house felt different, not hollow now, but purposeful, like the pause before a craftsman lifts his chisel. Something in me had settled. No more waiting for them to prove me wrong. They already had. I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook and a black pen. Under Andrew, assisted living, Laura, silence, Thomas, vulture, I wrote one new word in heavy strokes, plan. Revenge was too hot, too reckless. I wanted something colder, cleaner. Justice, an unarguable mirror. And the best part was, they were setting the whole thing in motion themselves. The next afternoon I called Douglas. "Samuel," I said simply, "I need a lawyer." He let out a short chuckle. "You already have one," he said. "No," I answered. "Not for me, for them." There was a pause on the line. "Explain," he said. I lowered my voice and laid it out. "If they think I am broke, they will crowd in. Thomas already tried to pick the place up cheap. I need everything recorded, documented, airtight. When the day comes, I want proof in black and white, every lie, every betrayal, every scheme, so it is not my word against theirs. Paper signatures, recordings, the whole thing." Douglas whistled low. "So you are building a case?" "No," I corrected him. "I am building a mirror." He did not argue. Instead he gave me the name of a quiet, discreet attorney he trusted, someone who handled estates and family disputes without drama. That evening I called and booked an appointment, saying I wanted to restructure my will. The lawyer did not need the whole story, he only needed to set the stage. The next week I went downtown wearing my oldest jacket and carrying a folder full of paid bills I had left scattered on purpose. The lawyer's office smelled of lemon polish and old paper. He greeted me with the polite detachment of someone who expects routine. "I want to make some changes," I said, sliding the folder across his desk. "Circumstances have shifted." We talked for more than an hour. I asked about wills, estate divisions, what claims siblings or children could press. He explained patiently, never guessing that I was lining each answer up as a brick in the wall I was building. When I left, I knew how to structure the paperwork so that when the truth came out, they could not twist it. I wrote in the notebook that night, mirror framed, glass still hidden. Legal papers were only one piece of the puzzle. The next step was financial. Money was the stage where they showed their true colors, and I still had $73 million quietly parked where they could not sniff it out. I went to the bank dressed in a suit I had not worn in years. The young manager smiled and shuffled the forms when I slid a pile of documents across the desk, trust account set up under neutral names, privacy clauses so tight they might as well be steel. "Are you sure you want this separation from your family, Mr. Carter?" he asked. "Positive," I replied. "If anything happens to me, I want this money protected and untouchable." He nodded and clicked his pen. "Then you will need trustees." "Who do I trust?" I said, and gave the answer he expected. "Not family." When I left the bank, I was tidy and secure in ways I had never been before. On the surface, I was the man drowning, underneath, I was more protected than ever. The test of my paper trail and preparations came sooner than I expected. One Sunday afternoon Laura turned up at my doorstep unannounced, clutching a casserole like it was a peace offering. "Dad," she said, forcing a smile, "I thought you might like some company." I let her in and watched her eyes flick to the stack of fake bills I had left in plain sight. She sat down, hands worrying a dish towel. "Dad," she said, "have you thought about selling the house? It is a lot for you alone. And if the bank is breathing down your neck," her voice trailed. "And if I sold," I asked, tilting my head, "where would I go?" She gave a brittle laugh. "Well, Andrew mentioned an assisted living place, or you could come stay with me for a while." "Just for a little while," she added, as if that were the point. Long enough to soothe her conscience, not long enough to inconvenience her. I smiled, politely. "That is kind of you, Laura. I will think about it." She left, casserole untouched. As the door clicked shut, I whispered into the recorder, "Laura, appearance of help. Reality, containment." A few days later Andrew called, voice all business. "Dad, Sophie and I talked. We think it is best to downsize before things get ugly. If you sign the house over to us, we will handle the payments. You will not have to worry." "Sign the house over?" I repeated, feeling the receiver cut into my palm. "That sounds practical," he added. "You can stay here a bit, but eventually we will move in." For him, it was tidy and efficient. For me, it would have been exile from my own life. "I will need time to think," I said. "Don't take too long," he pressed. "The bank will not wait." He hung up, leaving the room colder than before. But the cold only sharpened my resolve. Every offer they made, every excuse and self-serving solution, dug the graves they would soon occupy. I was only holding the shovel steady. That night Douglas came over and we sat on the porch while the leaves burned in neighbors' yards. "They are closing in," I said. "Good," he replied quietly. "The closer they get, the more they reveal. Don't rush it. Let them think they are winning." I nodded. The hardest part, I knew, would be to keep my hand hidden until the time came. Douglas sipped his coffee and gave me a look that had a spark in it. "When the time comes, Samuel, you will not just show them your hand," he said. "You will show them the whole deck." Then something I did not expect happened. One evening as I was clearing the dishes, the phone rang. It was Thomas again, syrupy and too smooth. "Samuel, brother," he said, "I've been thinking. Why let the bank take everything when I could buy the place tomorrow? Cash, no foreclosure mess. Clean and easy." I knew exactly what he was up to, trying to swoop in before anyone else. Oddly, I felt calm instead of furious. "All right," I said slowly. "Come by tomorrow. We will talk." After I hung up, I looked at the recorder sitting on the counter and thought, tomorrow the mask slips even further. I was ready. Everything was in place now, the legal papers, the trusts, the money hidden away, the evidence stacking up day by day. They thought they were circling a dying man. The truth was I was circling them. I closed the notebook, put out the lamp, and told the dark, "You wanted leverage. You'll get leverage, just not the way you expect." Morning found the table bathed in light and my coffee gone cold. I had not slept much. Thomas would be here today, the brother who shared my childhood and then too often emptied my wallet. I pulled the notebook close and wrote in one line, "Today he shows his hand." By noon there came a sharp knock. I opened the door and there he stood in his leather jacket, one hand already digging into a pocket like he was ready to make a deal. "Samuel," he said, all warmth, too much warmth. "You look good." He stepped inside, eyes flicking to the stack of unpaid bills I had left where he could see them. He did not sit until I motioned. Then he slapped an envelope onto the table. "Let's not waste time," he said. "I know you're in a bind. I'll buy the house tomorrow. Cash. No bank breathing down your neck. You get something, move to something smaller, live easy." He slid the envelope closer. "I'm doing this for you, Samuel." I did not touch it. "For me?" I echoed softly. His smile tightened. "We're brothers." Silence stretched, then I asked, "What's in the envelope?" "An offer," he said quickly. "Signed. Legal." I opened it carefully. The numbers made me laugh on the inside. It was a pittance, a vulture's offer, far below the house's value even in its worn state. I smoothed the paper flat and looked him in the eye. "Thomas, this is less than half what it's worth." He leaned forward, shrugging. "Half of something is better than nothing." You and I both know the bank would take it for less. And if I refuse? I asked. He shrugged again, playing casual. Then you drown. I'm offering a lifeline. A lifeline, I repeated in my head, and I knew right then I had him where I wanted him. What he did not know was that the little recorder under the table was catching every word. His faux generosity would be another piece of the puzzle. I said, give me a day to think. Let me talk to Andrew and Laura. His face flickered, then tightened. Samuel, don't drag the kids into this. They'll only complicate things. Why would that bother you? I asked. He forced a laugh. It doesn't. I just don't want you stressed. All right, I said. Tomorrow, then. He clapped my shoulder like we were boys again and left. I stood at the door and watched his shoes disappear down the street. When I came back in, the envelope lay thin and pathetic on the table. I whispered into the recorder, Thomas, cash offer, predatory. Mask slipping. That evening I called Andrew first. He answered quick, his voice tight. Dad, your uncle came by. Yeah. He offered to buy the house, I said. There was a pause, then Andrew snapped, don't sign anything, Dad. He'll rob you blind. Better put it under my name so it stays in the family. His tone shifted to a mix of warning and calculation. We'll figure it out. You can stay here a while or at Laura's. Because you trust Thomas? I asked quietly. Thomas moves fast, Andrew said. Don't wait too long. He hung up. I wrote in the notebook, Andrew, protective language, self-interest underneath. Next I called Laura. Her voice came with kids chattering in the background. Dad, is everything okay? Your uncle came by. He offered to buy the house, I said. Silence, then, did you consider it? She asked cautiously. I told her I would think about it. If you sold, where would you go? She asked. She hesitated, then said, you could stay with us for a little while. Maybe selling is not the worst idea. At least you wouldn't have the bank breathing down you. Better him than losing everything, she added under her breath. Better him. Better a vulture than her own guilt. I thanked her softly and ended the call. I sat back and let the house settle around me, the recorder's red light blinking like a small, patient eye. In the notebook I wrote, Laura, passive. Will surrender for peace of mind. Later that night Douglas came over. We sat on the porch with his thermos of black coffee and the crickets playing their steady chorus. I handed him the offer envelope. He read it, snorted. He's gutting you, he said. You're not actually going to. No, I interrupted. But I want them to believe I am. Tomorrow, Thomas returns. I'll let him think he's won. Douglas's eyes narrowed. You're baiting him. Exactly, I said. Every word, every gesture recorded. When the time comes, they won't just be greedy, they'll be complicit. He exhaled, smoke mixing with the night air. You're colder than I thought, Samuel. Colder is how you survive this, I said. The next day Thomas came early, smelling of aftershave and ambition. Well, he said, dropping into a chair. I slid the contract back across the table. I'm leaning, I told him, feigning relief, but I need one assurance. Anything, he perked up. If I buy it, I want to stay here a few months while I find a place. Of course, I said. You'll have time. His eagerness showed through. Let's do this, but keep it between us. No need to unsettle the kids until it's final. He grinned. The recorder caught everything. That night I replayed the tapes, Thomas's oily concern, Andrew's sharp edge, Laura's weary passivity. The picture was nearly complete. As I listened, something struck me, maybe the house wasn't the point. Maybe it was the stage, the place where their choices would be displayed in public, undeniable. I wrote one more line in the notebook, house equals stage. Truth equals curtain. With that the endgame began to take shape. I woke before dawn the next morning. The house was still and church quiet. I sat with the blinds half shut and the contract Thomas had brought lying where I could see it. Beside it, my recorder waited, a small witness that had caught every promise and every betrayal. I brewed coffee and watched the steam. My hands did not shake. The fear had burned out and something colder, heavier, had settled in, resolve. That afternoon I called Andrew. He answered briskly, almost expecting it. Dad, you made a decision? I have, I said. I've spoken with Thomas. I'm leaning toward selling, but I want you and Laura here when I finalize it. Tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, in the living room. There was a pause. His voice sharpened. Dad, don't let him talk you into this. Sign the house to me instead. Don't decide over the phone. Tomorrow at 6, I said. He exhaled. Fine. But you'll regret it. I wrote that down. I called Laura. She sounded distracted, children clamoring. Dad, what's wrong? I've decided, I said. Meeting tomorrow at 6, Andrew, Thomas, you, me. I want everything settled. Her silence stretched, then she whispered, if that's what you think is best. Best. The word hung like a question mark. Finally I rang Thomas. He was all charm. Samuel, I knew you'd see reason. Tomorrow then? I asked. Perfect. I'll bring the papers. 6 o'clock, I confirmed. After I hung up, the house felt charged, like the air just before a storm. The day went slow. I cleaned the place with care, polished the table, vacuumed the rug, arranged the chairs in the living room. Every detail mattered. This was not a family meeting. It was a stage, and tomorrow the curtain would rise. As I worked, memories of old Sunday dinners floated through me, Margaret setting the table, the kids laughing, Thomas telling loud jokes. Once this house was the center of gravity. Now it was a trap they could not yet see. In the evening Douglas arrived with his thermos. He looked around and said, "You're dressing it down." "It must look ordinary," I replied. "The more ordinary it seems, the less they'll suspect." He sipped and asked, "You sure you're ready?" "I've been ready since the ticket hit my hand," I said. He leaned in. "Walk me through it." I did. Tomorrow night, they'd gather. Thomas would bring his contract. Andrew would press his claim. Laura would try to smooth things over. I would listen, record, and let them reveal themselves. When every mask had fallen, I would pull back the curtain. Douglas whistled low, a sound that pleased him. Cold. Surgical. "It has to be," I said. "This isn't just revenge. It's the truth." Still, beneath it all, I knew it was both. The next evening the sun dipped low, turning the windows gold. I slid the recorder under the table, hidden but ready. The contract lay beside me, untouched. At 6 on the dot, the knock came. Thomas walked in first, swagger in his step, papers tucked under his arm. "Evening, Samuel," he said, clapping my back. "Let's make this quick." Moments later, Andrew arrived, jaw tight, eyes locked on the envelope in Thomas's hand. "So it's true?" He snapped. "You're actually considering this?" Laura came last, quiet, almost spectral, as though she were stepping into a church before a funeral. She sat down gently, eyes lowered. The four of us in the living room. The air so thick it felt alive. I let silence stretch until it hurt. Then. "Tonight," I said, "we settle this." Thomas leaned forward, dropped the papers onto the coffee table. "Here it is. Cash. No bank, no waiting. You sign, Samuel, and you walk free." Andrew barked a bitter laugh. "Free? He's robbing you, Dad. Don't be stupid. Sign the deed to me. Keep it in the family. I'll take care of you." "Take care of him?" Thomas sneered. "You'll bleed him dry faster than I would. Better me than you." Andrew shot forward, face hot. Laura lifted her hands. "Stop it, both of you," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "This isn't about us. It's about Dad being safe." Their voices rose, crashing into one another, knives in a drawer. I stayed still, hands folded, listening. Letting them unravel. Finally Thomas slammed the table. "Choose, Samuel. Right now." I looked at him. Then at Andrew. Then at Laura. Their faces told the story without words: greed, desperation, fear. Family stripped bare. I let silence fall, deeper than before. Then I said softly, "Do you know what this house is?" They stared. "It isn't wood and nails. It isn't equity. It's a mirror. And tonight, you've shown me exactly who you are." Thomas scowled. "What the hell are you talking about?" I reached under the table, pulled out the recorder, and pressed stop. The red light blinked once, then died. I set it on the table. Andrew stiffened. Laura's eyes widened. Thomas went pale. "Every word," I said coldly. Every threat, every bargain, every plea, recorded. The room froze. You came here thinking I was cornered, I continued. But you were the ones on stage. And the truth you revealed, that's worth more than any deed. Thomas surged to his feet. You can't. I already did, I cut in. Tomorrow the lawyer hears it. The bank hears it. And if I need to, the world hears it. Sit down. He sat. Slowly. I turned to Andrew, his face burning with anger. To Laura, her eyes wet. This was never about saving me, I said. It was about what you wanted. And now I know. Silence hung heavy. At last I stood, folded the contract once, slid it back across the table. Take this, I said to Thomas. It's worthless now. He didn't move. Dad, Andrew muttered, you don't have to. I do, I snapped. Because tonight proved something. Money doesn't change people. It shows them. I walked to the door, opened it wide. Now leave. For a moment they stayed frozen. Then, one by one, they moved. Thomas first, storming out, his swagger gone. Andrew next, jaw tight, muttering. Laura lingered at the doorway, whispering, I'm sorry, Dad, before vanishing into the night. The door closed. The house fell still. The stage was cleared. The curtain down. But deep inside, I knew the play wasn't over. One act remained. The revelation I'd kept hidden from them all. The ticket. They thought the house was the prize. But the house was only bait. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my chair, glass of water in hand, and replayed it all, their raised voices, the hunger in every word, the shock when the red light blinked. For years I told myself family was everything. Last night I learned the truth, family, stripped of pretense, can be the hungriest wolves of all. But tomorrow, the truth about the ticket. And when that curtain rose, they would never forget. Morning crawled in under a blanket of gray clouds. I dressed different that day, not my usual worn flannel but a clean, pressed shirt jacket and shoes shined until they nearly showed my reflection. I caught myself in the mirror and did not recognize the tired man looking back. For once I didn't see the long-suffering father or the brother who'd been pushed around. I saw somebody who still got to decide. At noon Douglas knocked. You look like you're headed to court, he said, squinting. In a manner of speaking, I answered. Only the verdicts are already written. He rode with me in silence. I went to the bank, the plain sealed envelope warm against my chest, nothing to do with Thomas's contract or Andrew's schemes. This envelope held the only thing that mattered, my claim, the paperwork proving the lottery account, proof that $73 million were sitting secure. My lawyer had quietly prepared it weeks earlier at my request. By the time I pulled back into the drive a storm was rolling in, thick air, electricity in it. I called Laura. Bring Andrew. Bring Thomas if you have to. Tonight. One last time. After this there are no more meetings. Dad, are you sure? She hesitated. Yes, I said. 8 o'clock. Rain began to spit as they arrived, headlights sweeping across the driveway. They came in wet and uneasy, eyes flicking immediately to the empty table, no contract staged on it this time. No performance. Just me in the armchair and the sealed envelope on the mantel. Andrew was the first to speak. Dad, what is this? Another trick. Thomas snarled. I don't have time for games. Laura stood by the door, pale as a sheet. I motioned with my hand. Sit down. This won't take long. They hesitated, then sat. Thunder rolled beyond the windows. You were here last time, I began slowly, thinking the house was everything, thinking I was cornered and desperate. You bared your teeth and I saw you. Their brows drew together. But the house was never the prize. Andrew's irritation surfaced. What are you talking about? He asked. I walked to the mantel and lifted the envelope into my hands, it felt heavier than its size. 3 weeks ago, I told them, I won $73 million in the lottery. The words dropped into the room like stones. Andrew blinked, confusion curving into disbelief. What? He breathed. Thomas barked a short, bitter laugh. You expect us to buy that? Laura covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide. I turned the envelope so they could see it. Inside this are the documents, signed, sealed proof. I haven't spent a cent. The shift was instantaneous. Their attention snapped from me to the envelope as if a scent had been released. Andrew leaned forward. Dad, if that's true, we can fix everything. You don't have to struggle. I can manage it. Thomas scoffed. Trust him. He'll blow it. I know how to handle money, let me invest it. I'll double it. Laura shook her head hard. No. This isn't about you two. Dad, use it for yourself. Live for you for once. They talked over one another, greed and urgency and denial climbing with every sentence. It was the same scene as before, only the stakes were larger. Last time they showed themselves with the house as bait, tonight the prize was a fortune. Again, they revealed who they were. I set the envelope back on the mantel and faced them. I wanted to see, I said quietly. When you thought I was broke, who stood by me? Who cared? I saw the answers. Now I wanted to see the other side. If you knew I had everything, who would you become? The moment stretched out in front of me, and their faces told me everything. Andrew's eyes darted like a cornered animal, his lips moving but no words coming out. Thomas's jaw tightened, his body leaning forward as if he was ready to pounce. Laura sat frozen, her eyes wet, her hands twisting in her lap. You failed both tests, I said, my voice steady, almost cold. When you thought I had nothing, you left me to sink. And when you thought I had everything, you tried to grab it for yourselves. Not one of you looked at me, not once. All you saw was what you could take. Andrew shot up, fists balled. That's not fair. I'm your son. I stared him down. You were my son long before money was ever on the table. And long before tonight, you showed me exactly where I stood. Thomas let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. So what now, Samuel? You gonna cut us out completely? Leave us standing here with nothing? I held each of their eyes in turn. Yes. Nothing. Laura broke first. Her shoulders sagged, and she crumpled onto the couch, crying into her hands. Andrew cursed and paced the floor, his anger spilling out in every step. Thomas's face twisted in silent fury, but he kept his mouth shut. I walked slowly to the door, opened it wide, and let the rain and thunder from outside roll into the room. Get out. None of them moved. I said, get out. This time they did. Thomas stormed past me first, his muttering lost in the storm. Andrew followed, pale and tight-lipped, his eyes full of something I didn't recognize, something dark. Laura lingered, her tears streaking down her face. Dad, please. Don't shut me out, she whispered. I wanted to believe her. But belief had been wrung out of me long ago. You made your choice, Laura. Tonight, I made mine. Her head dropped as she turned and walked into the rain. When the door closed, I stood there for a long moment, the storm raging just beyond the porch. The house felt different, lighter. Quieter in a way that didn't hurt. The envelope still rested on the mantel. I slipped it into the drawer, locked it, and finally exhaled. The days that followed were filled with silence, broken only by the phone. Andrew's furious voicemails. Laura's pleading ones. Thomas's silence, which said more than words ever could. I never picked up. I didn't need to. They'd already told me everything I needed to know. Instead, I sat with my lawyer. We drew up papers, trusts, and foundations they'd never touch. Not a single dime would land in their pockets. Instead, the money would go where it mattered, scholarships in Margaret's name, a wing at the hospital, a shelter that could keep men like me from ever being forgotten. Quiet, lasting legacies they'd never twist into power over me. One afternoon, Douglas sat beside me on the porch, his thermos of black coffee steaming in the cool air. He studied me for a while, then said, "You look like you finally laid your burden down." I did, I told him. For the first time, I know exactly who they are. And I know exactly who I am. He nodded, slow and certain. So, Samuel, what now? I looked out at the horizon, the storm clouds breaking, the sky opening into light. Now? Now I live. And that's how it ended. Not with a fight. Not with anger. But with truth. They thought money gave them power over me. They thought they could bend me, break me, guilt me into submission. But leverage only works if you let someone lift or press you down. I finally stepped away. The 73 million still sat untouched, but I'd already spent it in the only way that mattered. I used it to cut the chains that tied me to people who never saw me. My name is Samuel Carter. I'm 58 years old. And for the first time in my life, I am free. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.